The story has a little bit of background, so bear with me. What I'm talking about here happened last year when I was 17. Now, I am from Ireland and my family are heavily involved in two sports, golf and boxing. I didn't really like golf, but I loved boxing. So when I was 8 years old, my grandfather got me a pair of gloves and I began training. He was once an amateur champion in the 60s and has been training people how to box in our local community center for the last 40 to 50 years. Unfortunately, his cancer had stopped him from continuing this though, but he is in remission and hopes to be back to training soon. He trained me from 8 years old and I absolutely loved it, but outside of the gym and ring, I was still non-confrontational and I preferred not to fight. Fast forward a few years and we get to the situation I'm about to share with you. It was around Easter last year and I was in the city. I live in a small suburb. It was around 11 p.m. and me and my friends had finished playing pool in a local bar. I had used a fake ID. We went our separate ways and began walking to catch the bus. I soon realized there was a tall bearded man in a gray tracksuit walking behind me. I think little of it and keep walking. It's only after making a couple of turns do I realize he is following me. This is even worse now because in order to get to my bus stop, I needed to go through an alley. I decide to say screw it and I go into the alley, and that is when my pursuer speeds up and eventually is about a foot behind before shouting, "Hey, stop. Give me your phone and your wallet." I begin shitting bricks. As I said, I may be a boxer, but I hate confrontation. But also, it's a new phone and the wallet was passed down to me by my other deceased grandfather. So obviously I didn't want to give him it. I turned around and he's holding a small combat knife. I probably know where he got it. There's an army shop in the city that sells them. He's holding the knife out and once again asks for my phone and wallet. I know what you're thinking. I probably should have just ran. Well, yes. But one too many punches to the head makes you a bit dense. And now I can see the guy a bit more. He's overweight and bald. I knew I was faster, but he was too close to run. I simply replied, no. And he didn't like that and he went to stab me. It's official. I'm shitting myself. I managed to get out of the way of the stab and I immediately go into fight mode. I begin throwing punches, but of course, this crazy mugger has a chin of steel. He gets really close and goes to stab me again, and he is too close to dodge this time. So I move my hand and he stabs my hand. You cannot believe how much it hurt. Like shit. And that is precisely what I shouted. But with the adrenaline, I uppercutted him with my free hand and stunned him enough to run away. Thank God there was an ambulance parked nearby. The medics were on their break getting Burger King, and they took me to the hospital and the police were called. I gave him a good description, but he was never caught. I'm truly just thankful that the knife didn't go all the way through, and the scar is mostly gone. Although my hand will randomly feel numb from time to time. A couple of months ago, I went back to my hometown to visit my family and friends over Easter. I usually stay at my father's house, and I did so this time as well, even though he and his girlfriend were on vacation. The house is very big with a big garden and a fence around it, but the gate is always open, and I don't have the key to lock it. And even if I did, I would have never have thought of locking it, because my dad lives in the most fancy part of town, in a very wealthy country where all the embassies are. I've literally never heard of anything unusual happening in that neighborhood. So I'm alone in this huge house, and I've never felt unsafe in any way. The guest room is located on the ground floor and has one window pointing out to the driveway and one into the garden. Either window has curtains, which did make me pretty uncomfortable at times, as I have a habit of staying up late with the light on, so I'd be easily visible from outside. So one Friday I'm on my way home from a night out with my friend, and as my dad's house is so close to the city center, I decide to walk home. The first 3/4 of the way goes along the main street, with many streetlights and tram stops every few hundred meters. It's at one of those tram stops that I noticed a guy sitting on his bicycle. I don't know why I took note of him, but something must have felt wrong about him. Even then, because he kind of stuck in my mind. Thinking back, it might have been the way he looked at me. Anyway, I continue up the street and glance back, but the guy is still sitting there on his bike, so I forget about him. Around the next tram stop, I get a weird feeling in the back of my neck, and I can hear someone about 3 meters behind me on a bike. Without looking back, I go to the very edge of the sidewalk to let them pass, but they never do. I'm starting to get uncomfortable, and I walk slower to make them pass me. I mean, I'm walking, and they're on a bike, so why would they go so slowly and not pass me? I finally take a look at them, and wouldn't you know, it's the guy from earlier. I face up ahead again and think fast. At the next crossing, I would have to go into a lesser lit side street with absolutely no people around. I decided to go to the nearby tram station instead and pretend I'm waiting for the tram, even though it must have been obvious I wasn't, since the guy must have seen me pass 2 tram stations and the line would have gone back the way I just came from. So I stand there and look back at him, and he stops his bike and just stares at me for a couple of seconds, then rides off and disappears behind the waiting booth. I never see him come out at the other end though. After a few minutes, I decided I've waited enough, and I go into the dimly lit side street leading home, all the while looking behind me every 5 seconds. I finally arrive home, and this time I close the gate outside, but like I said, I don't have the key, so I can't lock it. I go into my room a little uneasy, and this time I take off my shirt and bra in the corner, in the one corner that's outside of the view of either window. I want to put on my pajamas, but it's on the bed, so I go there still topless, thinking, well, it's just for a second, and besides, there's no way this guy followed me here. I move to the bed, and bam, a camera flash clearly goes off in the garden. I instantly jump to the light switch, turn it off, and drop to the floor. I lie there for a few seconds in shock. Then my eyes start watering and I start sobbing like a baby. I think about everything for a few minutes, trying to convince myself I just imagined it, but I am 100% sure of what I saw. The flash even came from the exact spot in between 2 trees where I always thought would be a perfect stalker hideout. So I called the police, and while waiting for them to show up, I go to the kitchen to grab a knife, all the while trying to stay away from all the windows. Thankfully, 2 officers show up pretty fast, one going directly into the garden and the other one coming inside and asking me all these questions. Of course they didn't find anything, since my reaction to the flash was so obvious that the creeper must have run off, but I felt a lot better after they told me they'll be on the lookout around the neighborhood, and usually this kind of voyeuristic person doesn't try to break in or do anything violent. Funnily enough, after they left, I actually instantly fell into a deep, calm sleep. I was unreasonably paranoid and jumpy for the next 2 days though, and I took some bed sheets and clamped them between the windows and wall. I never told my dad or his girlfriend about it because she's a district attorney and she's always super paranoid about her privacy. I'm not even allowed to take pictures around the house in case a criminal could trace them back to her somehow. So I didn't want her to worry about some lame creep who has nothing to do with her. I had just gotten out of a really shitty relationship with a guy I had been living with for 3 years. He was a really pretty boy who looked like Johnny Depp, but he liked to steal all of my money while I was at work and throw crazy parties. I eventually got tired of his stealing and coming home to people asleep all over my house, so I left him. I didn't want anything but my stuff, and I let him keep the house and cars that I bought him. I just wanted my sanity back. I decided to move back in with my granny for a while. It seemed I was always her favorite grandchild, and she spoiled me as she does. I had recently reconnected with my best friend that I had known since kindergarten, Chris. I was hanging out with him on my back porch one morning when the subject of boys gets brought up. Chris is gay and we often talk about boys together. He asked if I was seeing anybody and I tell him that I'm not. It had only been a few months since I left the money leech and I didn't think I was ready to trust anyone yet. Chris said that he knew the perfect man for me though. I said that I don't think there is such a thing, but he still insists and begs me to meet this guy. I reluctantly sigh and I tell my granny that I'm going on an adventure with Chris, and we talked as we drove and he tells me that this guy's been in love with me since we were kids. He told me it was this boy, Quinn, that used to follow me around. I told him that I thought Quinn was a lot younger than us, but he replied saying that it's just because he's short like me. He called Quinn and told me to talk to him. I do, and he seems really sweet, but a little airheaded. We show up at his house and he's really pretty, and he's very sweet. Has a good job, his own car, and owns his own company. We started hanging out a lot and eventually started dating. He buys me presents like nice jewelry and Prada glasses. He told me his girl only deserved the best. I told him I couldn't accept all these gifts, but he would just dump them in my car or my purse when I wasn't looking, so I just learned to take them. He wanted to always call me and talk for hours and wanted to call when I got home from his house. I thought it was just because he was sweet and only wanted to make sure I got home safely. But the reality set in rather quickly. He introduced me to his entire family within only a couple of days of us dating. I usually don't introduce guys to my family until we're serious, but whatever. Upon meeting his mother, I learned that it's her house and he lives there with her. I also learned that he has no job other than doing odd jobs for his dad. I was speechless. He even lied about being my age. I was 24 at the time and he had just turned 18, like a day or so before we started dating. I was so upset that I didn't know how to feel. He begs me to not leave him and to take him to my play rehearsal the next day. He showed up in my driveway just as I was leaving for the theater. Chris drove him there and tells me we need to sort our shit out. He said if Quinn was gay that he would be all over him and not to leave him over a few small lies. This whole drive was awkward. I didn't want to talk to this guy at all. I just wanted him gone. He then pulls out a diamond ring and tries to propose to me. I told him no, but he slides the rock on my finger anyway. He said I only needed to think about it. I got to the theater and shit just goes downhill from there. He embarrassed me in front of my friends with his ignorance and childishness and threw a bitch fit because my other best friend, Mikey, gave me a piggyback ride. He storms out and then his mother started calling to check up on him. I decided I was done. After rehearsal, I got a friend to go with me to drive him home and I tried to give his ring back but he wouldn't take it. I leave and go to a bar with a few friends and I told him that was why I had to take him home so early. Driving back, I see flashing lights in my rear view mirror and I hear yelling. Chris and Quinn are following me. I pull into the bar and Chris throws Quinn and myself at each other and yells that we need to talk. I break up with Quinn on the spot and he starts throwing a fit. I walk into the bar with my friend and I spent the night at Mikey's for a few days. When I returned home, I had tons of harassing phone calls. He called me and my grandparents every few hours. He even had Chris help. Everywhere I went, he was there. He stalked me at home, made me run from a theater during a movie, and followed my car. Chris helped him do all of this. He even pulled a gun on my family while we were outside during Easter. I was helping the little kids hunt eggs when he cruised by several times and then pulled his gun, threatening to shoot. I filed a restraining order that day and I moved in with Mikey so he would leave my grandparents alone. I went nowhere without at least 2 guys with me at all times. I thought any minute he would come and kill me. I felt like I was being stalked and hunted like a deer in the woods. I was lucky because one day he shot up the car of his next girlfriend while her 2-year-old daughter was inside. I was damn lucky. My dad and I went hiking a few days ago. My dad is a waterfall fanatic and he wants to see as many as possible. So he and I are hiking along a pretty trail. We're hiking along a river and it's flowing nicely and there's mountains all around us. The trail is weaving around big, beautiful boulders. I'm hiking at most 30 feet ahead of him, looking for a spot to stop and have a sit down for our picnic lunch. And as I rounded a blind curve in the trail, I just froze. Sitting on a stump maybe 10 feet off the right side of the trail is a guy. He's wearing one of those colorful Baja hoodies with the hood pulled up and a half mask with rabbit ears. He sees me and stands up right as my dad rounds the corner. We're all three sizing each other up in silence and my dad addresses him. "What's up, buddy?" The masked man tips his head as if he was deciding what to do with us, then says back, "Not much, you guys aren't the ones I'm waiting for. Have a good day." Then he turns and jogs off quickly into the woods. Strapped on his lower back was a large hunting knife and he had a pistol on his hip. We lost sight of him pretty quickly. He hadn't seen a soul on the trail all day, and we had been hiking for almost 3 hours. Needless to say, we left the waterfall for another day and quickly turned around. Once we were off the trail, we reported it to the local Forest Service and the police, but they said they couldn't really do anything aside from keep an eye out for any suspicious activity. The masked guy didn't have a backpack or water or anything, which makes me think he had either stashed it somewhere or was maybe camping and waiting nearby. I hate to admit it, but I desperately wanted to go after the guy and ask who he was waiting for and why. This happened to me about 4 years ago when I was 21. So it's Easter, broad daylight, maybe around 11 a.m. I'm in the fashion district of my big city, which is relatively safe during daytime. I'd never had any actual run-ins with crazy people, even though I would see homeless people and unwell people all the time talking to themselves. I'm normally pretty good at keeping my head down and sensing danger before it happens, or so I thought. Anyways, I was looking for a nice shoe store, and I passed a homeless woman who's either on drugs or unwell, or both, and I made a note of her. But I ignore her because it's broad daylight and it's Easter, and there's many people around. However, she was sitting on the edge of the sidewalk yelling to herself. I go into my store a couple blocks down and finish up there. I pass her again to go to another store. Then when I go to pass her a third time, that was the last straw for her apparently. She decided that she knew me from somewhere. I see her get up and start to yell at me. "Hey you, fuck you, bitch. You stupid bitch. You thought I wouldn't know it was you." And she charges at me. It all happened so fast. I thought I was having a leisurely stroll on Easter, so I didn't have my car keys out yet, or even my pepper spray. I start to run to my car and she's behind me. I'm now kind of against my car and I turn around. She's right there. I size her up and she's very dirty and has sores, and I think to myself I definitely don't want to fight her. Not that I can even fight anyways, but I figure now is not the time to learn. I also think to myself that if I stay by my car she's going to damage it in the process of trying to attack me, and I can't find my keys in time. She goes to sucker punch me in the back of the neck as I duck and run and she barely misses me. This is all within like 10 seconds by the way, it all happened so fast. Also, nobody is helping, despite it being a busy street, even with me screaming. I am lucky enough to accidentally run into the last store I had been in. If it had been another store that didn't know me, I think they probably would have kicked me out for causing a scene. I live in a big city and I've had issues like this before, where shopkeepers won't help because they don't want the drama. You know, the drama I had nothing to do with, but I digress. I ran to the employee and I was crying telling him about the lady, and she runs in after me and I hide behind the counter with me telling the guy worker that I need to get to my car and that she won't let me and that she tried to hit me, etc. He must have known her from the neighborhood and he held her back for me as I got into my car and drove off safely. The whole time she was still screaming and trying to get around him to me. I finally made it to my family's Easter thing safe, but I avoided that part of the city for a couple of years. I've always wanted to go back and thank that man. I don't know what would have happened if he wasn't there or how I would have gotten into my car. And to that crazy lady who thought she knew me and wanted to punch me in the street on Easter, you're insane.